the F minor set is a very special pair that really owns its place as number 12 in the series. It's usually, if you play it in a concert, you would break after this one, and you can see by some details that Bach had thought of this prelude to signal the halfway point, if you want. If only by the fact that he has chosen a very chromatic subject for his fugue. In fact, nothing but chromaticism, really. Which he will only better, so to speak, by the subject he will choose for the last fugue, which is even more bizarre, but as chromatic. So there is a real link between those two fugues, the last one being an even more extreme version of that already strange piece. It is a deeply moving set. The prelude sounds a bit like the sarabande of the second partita. It's the same way of writing for the instrument, and it's the same speed and the same mood. The interesting thing for us pianists with this prelude is that it actually is one of those things which is designed in some ways to showcase a particular harpsichord technique in order to make the instrument sing and to compensate for the fact that the harpsichord doesn't have the pedal. It is customary to hold some notes of your melody to help create a richer texture. So that you can get by with. On the piano, I can use the pedal to help creating that kind of texture, and I think I should, because despite the fact some players and some famous players advocate that Bach should be played on the piano without pedal because the harpsichord doesn't have pedal and Bach didn't know the pedal, I think it's a fallacy, because the fact is, the piano and the pedal are one thing. The piano doesn't exist without the pedal. The sound of the piano is conceived with the help of the pedal. It's not like you can artificially separate them. The harpsichord doesn't need a pedal, it cannot have a pedal. The piano absolutely need one. And the fact is that the sounds that sound so rich and grand on the harpsichord when you do this, because the strings are plucked, falls a bit flat if you don't help yourself by liberating all the strings and letting the sound vibrate more. So you don't use the pedal in Bach in order to help to sustain chords or things like that, that you can indeed do with your hands. But I think it is very sensible to use it, and to use it a lot, but very tactfully and carefully, to make the sound of the piano sing, because I think Bach, above all, should sing at all time. Now, the writing, therefore, suggests a kind of complex polyphony, and we come to an interesting point about polyphony. Is there are some kind of polyphony where one really tries to make heard the fact that we are talking about different voices, and that I will show in the fugue more clearly. In the prelude, it's the opposite, really. We have a 4-part texture that we are really trying to pass as uniform as for something as uniform as possible. So, for example, if I was trying to make it polyphonic in the fugal sense, I might want to play like this. Something like that. Making the notes which are the longest, the loudest. That's a typical way of, and very efficient way of doing polyphony on the piano. However, here I do not want the listener to know exactly which voice is doing which. I want a blend. So I will do a... And that is slightly counterintuitive because we spend much of our time playing Bach trying to be as clear as possible in our treatment of the different voices. And here we must do exactly the opposite. So we come to parts like this. That for years you would try in a fugue to do. But here, it doesn't serve you anymore. You really have to make the whole... So that's what is interesting as a pianist playing this prelude. The fugue has, as I said, this absolutely fascinating, very dark subject, very stark. Which is then answered by two things which are nearly the same and yet which meaning is completely different. One of them is a 4-note ascending figure, which you can hear on the left. Which comes through the piece either in its ascending form or in its descending form, and Bach varies a lot and play with it, so you would have a... So that's for one. And that suggests anxiety to me, this constant reiteration and this rest. And however, there is in episode, and this fugue is clearly divided between episode and moment where the subject is there, a 3-note ascending or descending figure, and that carries a sense of hope, and God knows why, because it's nearly the same thing. But when we're... and it works the other way too. So the episodes are entirely built on this figure. The subject always comes accompanied with the 4-note one. My way of treating this fugue and highlighting this difference of mood between those two different elements is to play anything which has a subject in a rather austere and severe way, so not particularly beautiful in fact. For example, and then change the texture for the episode. And create a really different texture. And then we come back So I play on this alternance between two absolutely, and interestingly, that's something I also do pretty much in exactly the same way in the last fugue. So we'll talk about it when time comes. Now, this is a fugue in which I do exactly the opposite of the prelude. I try to make the contrapuntal work as clear as possible for the listener. And because the tempo is slow, you really have to calculate that the notes which are the longest will resonate through the end. So in some ways, the longer a note, the louder you should do it, in a way that doesn't sound forced or artificial. So listen a little bit, for example, the way I do the first episode. So if you can hear these notes resonate through this and then these notes, that's because I take great care of making sure they will not drop. For example, if I do, then you do lose the tension provoked by the fact that this note, which was consonant, or this note, which was consonant, then clashes and creates a dissonance that you want to solve. And Bach's texture are always driven forward by the fact that notes which at the moment they are played are perfectly consonant with the texture, at some point start to become dissonant, and that forces you to move away to another stable point, which then will become unstable. That is really the way this music works. And only a very careful, deliberate polyphonic playing can give you this.